So listen to this. Ronaldo Nazario was quite simply superhuman. If you watch him, that is the only possible conclusion. The human body is simply not prepared to withstand the sheer power Ronaldo was able to put down in every stride. It was like a gift from God at the eyes of every fan, and a curse to every doctor who ever had a look at his knees. Even more so, those same doctors tended to believe that not all of that power was God-given. You see, by 2008, Ronaldo was 32, out of a contract, and had spent almost a year on the sidelines, having ruptured the tendon that connected his kneecap to his shin bone. Rupturing it once would have been enough to end his career. This was the fourth time it happened. No one had ever seen that before, and everyone assumed his career was over, so, horrified, Bernardino Santi, the retired anti-doping coordinator of the Brazilian Federation, decided to reveal the truth to the public. He told the press that upon Ronaldo's arrival in Europe at 17, believing his body was too weak to cope with the physicality of Dutch football, PSV had put the player on steroids. Steroids that made his muscle incompatible to the bone structure of his knees, way beyond what could be naturally achievable. A revelation that, ironically, perfectly fit the timeline of a supposed growth spurt PSV had used to justify a sudden increase of 6 kilograms in Ronaldo's muscle mass. If somehow you still find his claims hard to believe, let me remind you that 6 years after that, the sport would go through one of the largest anti-doping crackdowns in its history. I'm talking dozens of players caught red-handed, Pep Guardiola, Edgar Davids, Jaap Stam, all receiving temporary bans for precisely that same kind of substance when, just a year earlier, Moises Cohen, a surgeon that had performed several of the most high-profile surgeries in Brazilian football, had told The Guardian, "Every day I see other footballers increasing their muscle mass artificially, but Ronaldo, nature did not produce this body to have the weight it carries today. Compare Ronaldo at PSV and Ronaldo at Inter. Those are two different people, only his teeth remain the same. It is a terrible anomaly." To further add to the mystery, by July of 1996, it had been 7 months since the first time he had torn his kneecap tendon, but strangely, PSV still refused to let him play, preferring to lose the title to Ajax rather than letting him on the pitch, no matter how many times the player threatened to leave, insisting that he had been fully recovered for months. Regardless, that summer, the Olympic Games took place, and once under the Brazilian Federation's umbrella, there was nothing they could do. After Brazil shockingly succumbed to Japan in the opening match, they were forced to unleash Ronaldo. Half an hour later, he was already dribbling the keeper to score his first. The next match, he put it in between the defender's legs before blasting it into the net, single-handedly securing their place in the quarters, where after going behind 2-1 late into the match, they watched as Ronaldo came out of nowhere to score twice, the second of which an absolute masterpiece, saving his team in under 9 minutes. But even if, unfortunately, Okocha and Kanu would barely edge them out in the semis, Ronaldo would show up once more, scoring and assisting against Portugal to secure the bronze medal, making sure that everyone could see that at 19 years old, he was about to enter what is considered by many the highest peak ever achieved by a footballer. In the words of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, as if Ronaldo and Messi had been rolled up into one player. But terribly, also the only 2 injury-free seasons of his career. Still, before getting into that, let me address something. Everyone always asks me how I manage to dig up news stories about these players every week, and the answer is that it isn't easy, not at all. You gotta optimize everything. The faster you go, the more chances you have of finding that next great plot twist, and when it comes to that, there's no bigger game changer than the Opera One R2 browser. Say I got 100 tabs open, no need to get lost. With tab traces, it's like following breadcrumbs. The darker the underscore, the more recent the tab. And with the tab islands, I can organize them in whatever categories I wish. They can even be created automatically. Then, once I found what I need, if it's too much to take in, I just hit Ctrl+/, the ARIA command line pops up, and it will help me piece things together. It can even take pictures in, put them in context, even generate new ones. And finally, once I'm ready to write, I just go into split screen mode. No need to keep multiple windows. I can have my script on one tab and the research on another. And as I'm doing all of that, I can still have fun. With the pop-out player, I just gotta hover over the icon to control my music. I can even move the player wherever I want, even outside the window, and you always got the coolest themes that you can customize however you want. So, if you want to take your work to the next level, just click the link in the description to download this browser. Now, back to what I was saying. By the time Ronaldo got back from the Olympic Games, the bidding war that had ensued was so outrageous that PSV, unwilling to let go of him, had 2 security guards follow him wherever he went in hopes of stopping any backdoor negotiations, and yet they still failed. Barcelona's vice president Joan Gaspar went as far as paying off a member of the hotel staff to give him his uniform so that he could use it to sneak into Ronaldo's room and hand him a contract. But even then, having effectively forced PSV to negotiate, they still ended up paying 15 million euros for the kid, breaking the world transfer record. And as Ronaldo was presented to the fans and bombarded with interviews, there was one question that stuck out to me. When asked what his biggest fear was, his answer was injury. An injured player is the saddest thing there is. Thankfully for now, that would not be a problem. Over the next 3 months, right up to the closing of the Ballon d'Or voting, Ronaldo would be involved in 24 goals in 17 matches for club and country. 2 goals against Atletico to lift the Super Cup, against Compostela, one of the greatest goals of all time, and a hat-trick against Valencia that had the fans waving white handkerchiefs, as a standing ovation was simply not enough. And so, when the time arrived, having played only 27 matches of senior football all year, with everyone already insisting that it was impossible to watch him and not think he was the greatest of all time, Ronaldo was named FIFA World Player of the Year. In fact, when France Football declared Matthias Sammer had won the Ballon d'Or with one of the narrowest margins in history, only 3 points more than Ronaldo, an investigation quickly proved that at the very least, the votes coming out of Northern Ireland had been miscounted, bringing that margin down to a single point, the lowest ever, leading many to believe that having just allowed George Weah to become the first non-European to win the award only a year before, the votes had been manipulated in order to maintain Europe's dominance over it. Regardless, at that point, Ronaldo had the world in his hand. The media fawned over him uncontrollably, the board felt they were obligated to indulge his every wish, and Bobby Robson felt he had no power over the kid, eventually exploding and telling the press, "I can't believe it. Every day he's in the papers criticizing my tactics. The boy's 20 years old, for Christ's sake. It's diabolical." But again, what could he possibly do? In February, Ronaldo left for the carnival against Robson's wishes, and sure, he could have dropped him to the bench, but he didn't, because over the next 21 matches, he would only fail to score in 4. It was unmatched consistency, the kind that allowed them to swiftly make their way to the final of the Cup Winners' Cup, beating PSG to the title as Ronaldo won and converted a penalty for the match's only goal. But that doesn't mean Ronaldo couldn't do no wrong. With 3 matches left to play in La Liga, thanks to Ronaldo's unbelievable goal-scoring run over the previous 3 months, Barcelona had climbed from being 9 points away from the top to now needing just 2 to overtake Real, who had only won 4 of their previous 9 matches. Everyone believed their comeback was only a matter of time. That was, until Ronaldo left to join Brazil for the Copa America. Then, just days later, as Barcelona shockingly lost to Hércules, a team bound for relegation, ultimately wasting their greatest chance to take the title, as Real Madrid too were humiliated by Celta de Vigo, all that Ronaldo's backup striker Juan Antonio Pizzi had to say was, "What can I do? I'm just a football player. He's from another world." After that, nothing else mattered. When it was time for the fans to name someone as their player of the season, even with the FIFA World Player of the Year among their ranks, they overwhelmingly voted for Luis Enrique instead. Though, in all fairness, I don't think Ronaldo cared much. With 34 goals in 37 La Liga matches, forget the Pichichi Award, he went straight for the European Golden Boot. 15 years would go by before another player was able to hit that mark. And after all, the Copa America clearly meant way more to him than any award ever could. There, no one got even close to Brazil. Ronaldo himself contributed to 7 goals in just 6 matches, as his team racked up close to 4 goals a game on their way to the title. By the time they handed him the Player of the Tournament award, he had brought his season's tally up to an unfathomable 80 goal contributions in 66 matches, and as everyone began wondering whether this 20-year-old could be football's greatest ever player, Barcelona knew there was no problem he could bring them that would ever outweigh the benefit of having such a monster on their side. So after months trying to secure him with contract pre-agreements and all kinds of bureaucracy, their president invited his agents over, verbally agreed to sign a renewal after dinner, and on his way to the restaurant announced to the press, "Ronaldo is ours for life." And that was his biggest mistake. Midway through their meal, one of the agents left to pick up a phone call, and on the other side was Massimo Moratti, president of Inter Milan, who promised to trigger Ronaldo's release clause and outbid Barcelona on any offers they could possibly make. And so, later that night, Ronaldo would walk out of the Barcelona offices without ever signing a contract, as their president admitted defeat, telling the press, "It's all over, Ronaldo is going." In a matter of hours, at just 20 years old, he had become only the second ever player to break the world transfer record twice. The other was Diego Armando Maradona. In Italy, the mission was clear. AC Milan had completely dominated the 90s, 6 Champions League finals and 5 league titles, so this signing was Inter's biggest statement in a decade. As if to say, we may have not won the league in 7 years, but the greatest player in the world still chose us. Now, there wasn't a team in the country that didn't fear Inter, and thanks to that, once again, Ronaldo was adored like a god. Every time he scored, his teammates would kneel down to shine his boots. As Djorkaeff said, in training, we would practically stop to watch him. It was extraordinary. By December, Ronaldo was already on 14 goals for his new club. Batistuta was the only striker who could even dare compare himself to him. In fact, I just have to mention this. For the glorious 45 minutes the two lined up beside each other in the World 11 ceremonial match, well, their team scored 5. Ronaldo assisted Batistuta for 3 of those, and Batistuta assisted Ronaldo for the other 2. For as long as I live, watching those two play a full season together will be one of my biggest football dreams, and thankfully, at the Confederations Cup, we got something very similar to that, as Ronaldo and Romário joined forces, contributing to 6 goals in 3 matches on their way to the final where, absurdly, Brazil took a 6-0 win with Ronaldo and Romário scoring 3 goals each. Matter of fact, 2 of Romário's goals were assisted by Ronaldo. Try to find me another player who put up 5 goal contributions in an intercontinental final. You can't. And that's why just 2 days after that game, Ronaldo had become the youngest ever to win the Ballon d'Or at just 21 years of age. From then on, it was no longer Ronaldo. As far as anyone cared, his new name was Il Fenomeno. For 16 match days, he had kept Inter at the top of the league table, and even once they dropped back to second, he made sure to score 16 goals in 17 matches to bring them back up. But it wasn't enough. Even worse, he only fell short because in their match against leader Juventus, the referee refused to call for a penalty, as Giuliano blatantly shoved Ronaldo inside the box. No matter what, the Serie A Player of the Year wasn't gonna let his season go by unrewarded. As all of this went down, Ronaldo recorded 5 goal contributions in 5 matches that led Inter to the UEFA Cup final, as not even the muddiest of Russian pitches was able to stop him. And once there, he scored one of the greatest goals of his career to make sure that if Inter weren't gonna come out of that season with a league title, at least they'd be European champions. After watching that final, even Zidane had to say that there was no system or tactics that could stop him. Ronaldo ran at 2,000 miles per hour. But unfortunately, from there on out, the world would be shown that there were still some things that could bring the phenomenon down, and Zidane would have front row seats to all of it. Just 2 months later, as Ronaldo got ready for the 1998 World Cup final, the idea that he was invincible had reached all-time highs, as he recorded 7 goal contributions in the 6 matches that preceded it. But as the French players pointlessly prepared to face him, with Desailly and Thuram being caught by the cameras claiming that it's magic, by the time he reaches you, you look down and poof, the ball is gone. Little could they know that over in the Brazilian camp, Edmundo had just found Ronaldo down on the floor, choking in his own tongue, convulsing. Out of nowhere, Brazil was announcing that Ronaldo would not be in the lineup, but then he woke up and showed up to the team's cafeteria claiming that he wanted to play. And to the shock of everyone, after rushing to the hospital an hour before the match, with the manager's approval, he was there, singing the national anthem as one of his teammates kept telling everyone, "This guy isn't okay, he's going to die on the pitch." Regardless, in the end, even if that didn't happen, Brazil had been demoralized and demolished 3-0 by Zidane's France, as Ronaldo sleepwalked for the whole 90 minutes, and as the millions of fans watching came up with one conspiracy theory after the other. Some say Nike contractually forced him onto the pitch, others claim the French poisoned his food. What we all know is that no respectable doctor would have ever let him on the pitch, and that soon, things would get much worse. With Ronaldo seeming determined to put this whole fiasco behind him, there was a lot of hope for his second season at Inter, but well, with his sponsors picking at him like vultures and the national team calling him up at any chance they had, Ronaldo was already bound to waste away much of his season. And then, once a severe case of tendinitis sidelined him only a month in, as his knee began to swell up once again, the whole year went by in a flash, and by the end, having been present for only 28 of Inter's 54 matches, the club collapsed to 8th place in the table. Still, with the star man putting on an absolute show at the Copa America, quite literally being involved in a goal in every single game, this time pairing up with Rivaldo to bring Brazil yet another trophy as the duo share the tournament's golden boot, he had once again put himself in a position where, regardless of any injury scares, the club felt obligated to build their team around him. They made him captain, they brought in several marquee signings from Seedorf to Christian Vieri, Adrien Mutu and Laurent Blanc, and yet, it all blew up in their faces. Only 7 matches in what seemed like the most unremarkable play ever, Ronaldo felt his knee buckle and ended up limping off the pitch. An hour later, the most damning of medical examinations had been completed. Ronaldo had ruptured his patellar tendon again. Look, this was obviously horrible, but the reality is that as tragic as it may have seemed, it was nowhere near rock bottom. 5 months later, as Inter went behind in their Coppa Italia final against league champions Lazio, they decided to bring in Ronaldo, who had been rushed back from injury and onto the bench, as the club already predicted it could be their one chance at taking the trophy. 6 minutes later, he fell onto the ground and let out one of the most terrifying screams ever heard on a football pitch. In the words of their physiotherapist, his knee exploded. When we found his kneecap, it was lodged all the way up by his thigh. In the end, Inter lost the final regardless, and Ronaldo was sent into the depths of their medical department as the first specialist who had a look at him said that he'd be lucky if he ever managed to live a normal life again. Eventually, a more optimistic surgeon estimated he could have him back on the pitch in 8 months, but by that point, he could not even bend his knee beyond 90 degrees, so instead, a second surgery followed, and after repeatedly enduring 9 hours of rehabilitation therapy a day, Ronaldo came back. It had been almost 2 years since the original injury, and even then, after 6 cameo appearances over the next 3 months, he was afforded 2 starts, and on the second, he went out with an hamstring injury. The guy had been out for so long, the rest of his body had begun to atrophy. Still, a month away from the end of the season, he did come back in hopes of making sure Inter held on to their place at the top of the league, but I kid you not, even with 4 goals in those last 4 matches, Ronaldo ended up leaving the pitch in tears as he shook the title on the final match day. Once it was time to announce the World Cup call-up, odds were Ronaldo would not make the list. Scolari himself said there was 95% chance he wouldn't, but as he got down to the last name, with both Ronaldo and Romario out of it, some kind of miracle happened, and so, with a gigantic scar on his knee and no one willing to put their money on him, Ronaldo went in and delivered one of the greatest World Cup performances in history. Before the tournament, Brazil had been in such poor form, the rumor was they were lucky to even be there. But apparently, Ronaldo was all it took to change that. He scored 4 and assisted another in their 3 group stage matches, then 1 more to make it past Belgium, and after going out against England with some muscular fatigue stemming from those past 2 years, he shaved off half of his head as a way to get people's attention on something other than his injuries, and proceeded to transcend every limit imaginable. Going into the semi-final at 60% fitness, having been told by his doctors not to shoot with the inside of his foot as it could worsen his condition, Ronaldo poked the ball with his toes to score the winning goal, and once in the final, he was the only one able to make it past the great Oliver Kahn, scoring twice, to finally redeem himself from the '98 fiasco, to make Brazil world champions, to unbelievably win the Ballon d'Or again, and to prove to anyone who may have doubted him that even at a massive disadvantage, he was still phenomenal.